Everybody can hear me quite well? Very good. Now, I feel that I'm a bit of a gate crasher at the moment because the title of the theme of the seminar, the workshop, I was told was going to be about Saudi cities. So hence the title of Planning for Communities, Making Saudi Places. But just before I start, can I just ask from the audience where you're from? So if you're from the private sector, can you put your hands up? Nobody from the so sort of investing, that kind of stuff. Okay, and what about the public sector? No? Okay. You're from the public sector. Students? Yeah, we've got a lot. And you're tourism students, yeah? Okay. Well, I hope this is going to be interesting for you guys. It is tourism related, which I will explain as we move on. I don't know whether, when I was introduced, my name is John Robinson, and I have a company called John Robinson Planning and Design. And I specialize in master planning, urban design, and tourism development. I've been doing this for quite a number of years, but my first long-term assignment, if you like, was many, many years ago in the early 80s. And this is when I had some hair. So this is, 35 years ago? And I worked in the Oman for the Ministry of Housing. And my job was quite interesting because I got to travel around the whole of Oman planning communities, housing communities, mixed-use communities, and the like. But I was very disillusioned as a young planner, mainly because I was trying to develop places using local cultural heritage aspects. But I was told constantly that, no, the market doesn't want all these kind of courtyards. They want Western type of developments. So what we ended up with was Western designs with wide roads, villas with back gardens, front gardens, big glass windows, which was really not, I didn't feel right, really, that I was designing these places. But of course, it wasn't just in Oman that these developments were rolled out. This was happening throughout the Middle East. And so all the developments started to look the same. You know, housing schemes, all the same, rolled out, with no cultural aspects or distinguishing aspects to it. So planning for communities, I feel, is just more than just plots and numbers. It's about people and creating a quality of life. So, 35 years on, and my daughter has now grown up, obviously, I'm still trying to sell those principles of placemaking, learning from the past and promoting mixed uses and walkable communities for the benefit of all. So what do we mean by making Saudi places? Well, it's obviously not like this. So I'm going to set out an approach which is about developing Saudi communities. And it's an approach which hopefully will sit well with yourselves, the private sector and the public sector as well. Now, the principles can also be used for resort development. This is where the link of tourism comes in, because a lot of developments that I've worked on over the years are these integrated resorts. So you may have a hotel, but you have quite a significant real estate component to it as well. So lots of real estate. So that's where these principles will hopefully fit in. Now at the end, I'd like to get some feedback from yourselves to see whether we're on the right lines or whether it's just these Western consultants coming in here and saying this is what you should do. So I'd like to get your feedback afterwards, and it's going to be quite interesting, I think, of the approach which I'll set out. So, how do we make Saudi places? Well, I think there are 5 key characteristics. They must have a character, an identity. So in other words, responding to and reinforcing that cultural heritage that we have. They must have a continuity and enclosure, so good public spaces, defining private areas and public areas. Quality public realm, and places that you can easily find your way around, not like that first image just went on and on and on. So something that you know where you are, and obviously offering diversity, and that means a mix of uses. So it's not just housing, it's also community facilities, tourism aspects, hotels, etc., but also commercial and religious, etc., etc. So where do we start in planning for these wonderful communities? Well, we start actually from learning from the past. And what I mean by that is developments of a human scale which encourages walking, yes, walking, believe it or not, and also which celebrates the local culture and values of a place. So, my view, we should start rediscovering the courtyard, okay, and its contribution to urban form, and also green buildings, because the early days, it was shaded, it was cool, and the places are designed for the climate, not like now. So what we're suggesting is that we get back to the image on the left, which is the traditional Saudi courtyard development, unlike the image on the right, which is a Western type of development, which could be anywhere in the world, okay? It's also about rediscovering the neighborhood. So in many conventional neighborhood developments, roads are very long, they're straight, they get very dusty, as you can probably tell, from the weather that we have at the moment. So it brings the inevitable problems of wind and dust, etc. So what we want to do is to provide areas with more shade, more shelter, more pedestrian areas, squares that facilitate community meetings, etc., and shops, mosques, the usual kind of things that you see in developments. It's also about creating centres. Now again, in a lot of Western type developments, you end up with these glass buildings, very tall. I think we should be getting back to centres that wind their way through a development, which actually enables more parts of the development to be accessible by people living around. So centres will therefore be a concentration of commercial and government facilities, covered shopping and mixed-use streets, adequate routes and open spaces, and a transport system that ensures ready accessibility to other parts of the development. It's also about providing good accessibility. So we need to plan for compact development, not spreading out, less land devoted to roads and car parks, and we also need an effective public transport system. I mentioned that we also need to learn from the past, and this is about landscape. I feel that we need to promote a high-quality landscape. After all, this introduces or influences the effectiveness of a settlement and as a good place to live, work, and play. So, how do we put all these components together? So we need some guidelines. This is where it gets interesting. So, unlike most planning, which starts from a top-down, we're going to be looking at a bottom-up approach. So that means the starting point is the house. Simple house. The single-family unit. This may be a traditional family courtyard, or it could be a house, it could be a villa, accommodating, say, around about 6 persons. The plan now is built up in stages. So then we have, I've called the Enclave, which is, say, consists of 10 to 16 family units, which provides a population of around 100 people. And it's basically a cluster of courtyard houses. It could be villas, it could be apartments, it could be mixed uses, it could be a boutique hotel as well. And this gives us a model of about 100 metres by 100 metres, which is very flexible. It also can be easily divided up to provide access. So, for example, the far one, you get access to each particular apartment or villa. The middle one is a central courtyard with access from internally. Thank you very much, my friend. And the last one is car parking, possibly on the outside of the cluster, which enables the internal space to be more of a garden space. Okay? So the next level up, we've termed the community. Now, this consists of 8 enclaves of around 800 to 1,000 population. And this will form a close-knit community and support a small local centre, which may comprise of a mosque, local shops, etc. Are you with it so far? Good. So the next one, the next level up, we've called it the neighbourhood. So this includes 6 of the communities, providing around about 6,000 population. The block size now is 800 metres by 800 metres, and again may be used for mixed uses, and it also can be combined to form larger integrated communities. So this neighbourhood now will start to support schools, shown in blue, and also a larger local centre, all within a comfortable walking distance of the neighbourhoods. So the next level, we're going to move around about 25,000 population. It's a bit like a plug-in city, isn't it, really, I guess? But this is structured to provide a hierarchy of communities and facilities. So the quarter is basically 4 neighbourhoods coming together, made up of 4 blocks, grouped around a main centre that provides shopping and services and local governance. And then finally, the district or the city quarter, comprising of 16 neighbourhoods, and this is about 100,000 population, and it supports a larger mixed-use core area. And again, these may be themed in terms of technology area, it could be themed as an education, it could be themed as a tourism area. So each one is a bit like, could be themed in a different way. Now, here we have a conceptual plan, if you like, that pulls all these elements together. And it shows 8 inclusive themed districts with strong connections to the core area. And a pedestrian link, a pedestrian route threads all the way through the development, which is in the green. And as I mentioned, each one of these particular areas could be themed. So we have, say, a tourism culture theme right at the top. We have an education theme, technology park. So this is how the community, or the city, if you like, can be built up. Still remember, starting from that house and that courtyard. So it's built up gradually. So just to explain a little bit more about the detail, if we look at the technology park, and we go down into a little bit more detail, you can see the aspects. If you remember the 5 characteristics that I mentioned at the beginning, we talked about the character and identity. So the core area, the one at the top, the linear one, is a linear shape with a main pedestrian spine in the middle meandering to break up the appearance of the rigidity. So it's meandering through, like the traditional souk, if you like. Vehicular access is provided from both sides, so you maintain that pedestrian feel and the small courtyards, etc. Car parking is on the outside, or it could be actually underground. And this feeds a mix of development, so it's higher density development towards the core. It also includes community and enclosure, so all the developments, the open space is enclosed, and we remember that development of the courtyard and how it's developed further. It has a quality public realm, so there's quite a lot of open space and landscape, and a lot of shade. so people can actually walk through the development. And I mention walking because this is an interesting one. I live in Dubai, and I've lived there for the last 7 years. And when I first went to Dubai and people started mentioning walking, everybody thought people were crazy. And I don't know if you know Dubai, but then it was designed very much for the car. So there was very few spaces that you could sit out and cafes and things like that. It wasn't built for walking. Nowadays, if you go to Dubai now, it's completely changed. It's given over to you've still got the main roads, but there's so many places now that you can sit out and walk through, and the new developments, there's themed open spaces. It's great for 7-8 months of the year. You can walk. It's only those few months of the year where it gets really hot, but that can be accommodated through shade, etc., and designing for the climate. It's very, very important, this walking, because through the research that we've done on other projects in Abu Dhabi and other Middle East countries, you're probably aware of the problem of obesity. So more walking, encouraging people to get out of their cars is very important. So hopefully I've shown a different way of planning communities away from those bland, undistinguished developments that you see normally, certainly from the West. And hopefully I've shown that communities can be different and respond to culture and environment. So let's celebrate our heritage, and let's celebrate, the last 35 years of me promoting these principles. They go a long way, I think, for creating places for people. Thank you. Now, that was a little bit about tourism, yeah? Was it interesting? Of course it was, yes. So, I've got another 10 or 15 minutes left. What I'd like to hear from you guys is, you've listened to what we've said about these planning for communities. Are we on the right lines? Is this correct? Is this something that places that you would like to live in? Anybody? No. Yes. Are we on the right lines? Has my 35 years of promoting these principles been in vain, or? Okay, good. All right, so if no more takers, that's great, because it leaves us more time for the other speakers to get feedback from yourselves as well. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope it wasn't too boring for you, and it was a little bit related to tourism, but at least it gives you something to think about when you go home, and if you're looking at your home environment. And please get rid of your car and start walking. Thank you very much indeed.
Here, sir, we talk about, change the society culture to do what we can change this society culture.
Can you maybe take the microphone a little bit? Yeah.
You hear me like?
No, go
okay.
Back. Go on.
So, here we want to change the society. You talk about how we build our houses and how we build our home, and people not have culture to walk on the streets, use the cars and these things, right? So we can use smaller place to accommodate more people, right?
Yes.
That's right. Okay. So if the culture here is not open to this for now, okay, we can choose a place inside Riyadh to make it for tourism only.
Yes. Yes.
Only for hotels. This will be as a resort, a big resort here in Riyadh.
You can use these principles for resort development. As I mentioned before, in fact, I'm working on a particular project here in Saudi at the moment. It's a mixed-use development which has hotels, it's got other products to encourage people to come, but it's also got quite a lot of residential areas and a village which is geared towards the Saudi market, obviously, with apartments, townhouses, And we're designing that very similar to what you've seen here with the courtyard principles. It's getting back to those Saudi principles at first. So I think, yes, it can be afforded to tourism development, yeah.
I listened that you see it before 7 years, you was in Dubai, you wasn't see this culture, now you see this culture there. Before around 6 years here, we don't have a boutique hotel. It was have already boutique hotel, but it wasn't called a boutique hotel.
Yeah.
Now 60% from hotel, it's called a boutique hotel. 60, 70 room inside the main street and call a boutique hotel, something like a hotel apartment or something for 4-star hotel, something like this. So is this the solution for tourism, for the future tourism, for the future, what it called? When people want to have a fun, to make, the holiday, where they can spend the holiday in Riyadh.
Yes.
Is there a new plan for this in Riyadh? Did you think we need something after we finish this Riyadh train? Did we can use this train line to make a new boutique hotel, a new strategy for spend the holiday inside Riyadh?
Yes. If I can use Dubai or Abu Dhabi again, there are these new boutique hotels that are coming on the market, which are designed very much around the courtyard and the courtyard principles. And the occupancy is usually a lot higher than the normal hotel, because I think people are looking for different things. We need that diversity. So yes, you need the standard hotel, but I think you also need something a little bit different. And why not get back to those principles?
بالنسبة إلى تطوير المدن، يوجد مدن قديمة في جميع مناطق المملكة، وكنت أتوقع أنك تتحدث عن تطوير هذه المدن القديمة وتحويلها إلى مدن شعبية مطورة كما حدث في الشارقة مثلا في مدينة التراث أو المدينة التراثية أو مدينة البستكية في دبي. طورت هذه المدن من مدن قديمة غير قابلة للعيش إلى أن أصبحت مدن جاذبة سياحيا على مستوى العالم. شكرا لك.
Good, I'm glad you brought that up. I've been to Jeddah, Al-Bada development, which is going through a process of rehabilitation. But the project that you're talking about in Dubai is very interesting. It's a project that I've just been working on. It's called the Historic District. And it includes, I don't know whether you're familiar with Dubai, but you have the creek. And on one side you have Deira, which is the old gold market. And on the other side you've got Shindaga and Al Fahidi. Now Al Fahidi and Shindaga used to be the areas where you had a lot of the old historic buildings. But in the mid-80s, towards the end of 80s, a lot of the buildings were bulldozed. Because in those days people didn't appreciate the heritage that they've got. And it was one guy that sort of stood up against the bulldozer and said, no more, we've got to preserve what we have. So if you go there now, certainly in Shindaga and Al Fahidi, the buildings have been reconstructed using photographs from old residents that used to live there, and they've been reconstructed very truthfully as possible. One of the things which is interesting though is the Dubai want to have UNESCO nomination, and I know that this is a situation here in Jeddah as well, where you're wanting to get UNESCO. The problem with UNESCO is that they put very stringent conditions on the redevelopment. For example, you have to use the traditional materials like coral. Now, I don't know whether there are any environmentalists in the room, but coral is a very sensitive material to use. And what's a little bit stupid is that the buildings are built out of the coral, reconstructed, but then they're cemented over, so you don't actually see the coral at all. But getting back to the point of the the reconstruction, you're right, it is a tourism attraction, but the attraction is really for international tourists. You still get local people walking around, but it's more for the international market. Now, I don't know whether if we did the same in Jeddah, whether the local Saudis would appreciate, going back in the past. I'm not sure. But certainly for the international market, it is a really good boost. It's very, very important. And it's very important anyway to preserve your culture. Does that answer? I have another story. Do you like stories? Which is a similar issue. As I mentioned, I lived in Oman. And in Oman, in the 80s, there's a place called Misfa. I don't know if anybody's familiar with... this was a village set in the mountains. So all the rooms were embedded into the actual mountain itself. And I remember going up there in the 80s when I had hair, and it was a fascinating place. The people were so friendly. I was invited into their rooms, and it was dark, but it was very cool, obviously. Then what happened is that the municipality decided to give them power and water. So in order to get power in there, you had to string all these power cables around all this historic mountain character. So when you went back to take those wonderful photographs that you had beforehand, now the photographs were covered in all these power lines. Now you may think, well, what do? Do you try and preserve it as it was, or do you allow modernity to happen and allow these poor villagers to have some power and water? So it's a very difficult situation. I went back there about 5 years ago, and what's happened is that a lot of the villagers now have moved out into a new development, a bit like the one that I described, the Western style. But at least they have electricity, they have power, they have water, and they have light, because the buildings are designed in such a way that affords light. So what's happened to Misfa, this old historic village? Any ideas? There's 3 families that live there now. It's all deteriorated. So what do you do in a situation like that? Do you just let it crumble? Or do you try and save it and put it back like it was? Or do you try and save it and make it into some kind of boutique hotel? That's the dilemma that I think Oman has got to deal with at the moment. What do you do? How do you preserve those old buildings? Because if you want people to live there, for example, in Shindiga and Fahidi, where I mentioned, local people aren't going to live there anymore because they want the modern lifestyle. So it's a difficult question to answer. What do you do and how you preserve these historic places? My colleague who will talk next, I know that he's got lots of experience on heritage cities, and so ask Robert when he comes up next. Yep.
You hear me?
Just a minute.
الصوت واضح ولا؟ It's a question by English. Thank you for this presentation. And I want to ask about that a city planning.
Yeah.
It should be. Okay. A city planning. I think it should be coming a planning as what the people need and what the culture need, not what the city need of buildings and of the street and of the industry. I think the problem here in the capital of Saudi Arabia here, it's the planning coming as what the city need about the street, about the buildings. Because of that, there is ignoring for all the open area and ignoring for the downtown for the cities. Because of that, it's coming a lot of crowding inside the city. There is no open area. There is a human problem here. Because of that, I think there is two options of the planning for the cities, industry cities and human cities. Because of that, there is a difference between that cities coming for the industry, for the business. It's different about another cities coming for the people or the human needs. Because of that, there's a different, and this is important things when the people coming to plan a city or plan a destination. This is what I'm talking about.
No, I agree. That's a good point. We have a difficulty as well here in developing what I've presented. It looks great, with lots of narrow streets and shaded avenues and things like that. The problem that we have, and it's not just here, it's everywhere really, is that we have different disciplines. We have architects, planners, engineers, transport planners, and each one have got their own rules. So for example, if we wanted to make a little narrow courtyard, the transport planner would say, oh, you can't do that because we need to get a truck down there in case there's a fire, and if there's a truck there, we may need to get another vehicle past as well. So you end up with very wide roads. So the challenge really is for all these disciplines, the architects, the planners, tourism planners, to actually work together to try and create these better Saudi places. So that's another challenge that we have, I think. Oh, this is good.
You design something in Saudi Arabia, and what you design, what you planning in Saudi Arabia?
Several projects for the tourism, SCTH, as it's now known. I first came here in 2000 and something to work on the overall tourism master plan. So that covers the whole of the kingdom. And then I was commissioned to do the Eastern Province, which was more of a strategic plan, which set out guidelines for future development. Since then, I've been back doing smaller projects, for example, desert safari camps, national parks, and also actually looked at connecting Al-Bada in Jeddah with a waterfront. I don't know if you know Jeddah, you've got this huge, great big roundabout. How do you actually connect the two things together, the waterfront? And currently I'm working on a project on the Red Sea. So I know a little bit about Saudi Arabia. Is that it? Yep. Good. Thank you very much anyway for your feedback. It was much appreciated. Shukran.